Empires never fall in explosions. They die in the quiet hum of machines slowing down, in the flicker of factory lights that never turn on again, in the silence of men who once built the world, now watching it rust. The industrial age promised humanity dominion over matter itself. Iron and steam would conquer scarcity, machines would free the hands of men, and progress would march without end. But history has a darker rhythm, one where progress feeds on its own illusions until the engine stalls. Every empire begins with the same spark necessity, and every empire ends the same way: abundance without purpose. When Britain built its factories, it believed it had unlocked the secret of perpetual growth. Cotton from India, iron from Wales, coal from Yorkshire, all feeding a machine so vast it seemed unstoppable. Manchester was once called the workshop of the world. But workshops have workers, and workers have souls. And when those souls are reduced to gears in the machine, something essential begins to rot. In the late 1800s, the world watched the British Empire reach its peak. Steamships commanded the seas, trains carved through continents. London glowed like the beating heart of civilization. But inside its glory was a hidden decay, a pattern as old as Rome itself. 5 warning signs appear every time an industrial power begins to fall. They appeared in Rome. Warning sign 1: extraction replaces creation. At first, innovation drives the empire. People invent, build, and discover. But once comfort sets in, the system turns inward. It no longer creates, it extracts. The financiers replace the builders. The bankers replace the blacksmiths. The economy stops making things and starts feeding on itself. Rome's engineers once built aqueducts, roads, and cities that defied time. But by the 3rd century, Rome wasn't building, it was taxing. Its elites stopped innovating and started hoarding. Its wealth no longer came from productivity, but from control. It became a financial machine living off the provinces, draining the periphery to sustain the core. The same pattern unfolded in Victorian Britain. By 1900, London's financial markets were far more powerful than its factories. Investment shifted from industry to speculation. Britain exported money instead of goods, and while the rich grew richer, the working class stagnated. The empire that had once built ships now owns stock in other people's ships. When creation becomes less profitable than manipulation, decline has already begun. Warning sign 2: the empire outsources its soul. Industrial strength begins with the craftsman. But comfort replaces craftsmanship with convenience. Factories close, and nations tell themselves it's progress. In the early 20th century, Britain began importing more than it exported. The colonies that once depended on it began to industrialize for themselves. Japan, America, and Germany rose as Britain hollowed out. The heart of the empire moved from workshop floors to boardrooms, and the hands that once built the empire were told to adapt or disappear. Rome did the same. It outsourced its defense to mercenaries, men who fought for coin, not country. When loyalty is replaced by labor contracts, collapse is a matter of time. Every industrial empire does this. It forgets that the real engine isn't iron or oil, it's belief. The belief that what you build matters. When the people stop believing, the empire loses its heartbeat. Warning sign 3: consumption replaces discipline. Industrial societies are born from discipline. Long hours, thrift, delayed gratification. But success breeds indulgence. The children of builders become consumers of comfort. Factories turn into shopping centers. Debt replaces savings. Work becomes optional, and production moves elsewhere. The Romans called it bread and circuses. The British called it the gentleman's lifestyle. We call it the weekend. All civilizations find ways to justify decay. They tell themselves they've evolved beyond the need for struggle. But history shows when comfort becomes a right, collapse becomes inevitable. Warning sign 4: the elite detach from reality. When Rome's emperors built marble palaces while farmers starved, it wasn't ignorance, it was insulation. They had created a parallel world where symbols replaced substance, gold coins replaced grain, decrees replaced discipline. The industrial barons of the 19th century, men like Carnegie, Vanderbilt, and Rockefeller, understood both creation and control. They built their empires with their own hands before buying others. But their descendants, they built nothing. They inherited, speculated, and insulated themselves from the system their ancestors forged. By the 20th century, British elites were no longer engineers. They were investors. And by the 21st, American elites became something even worse: influencers. Every civilization breeds a class that believes it can manage decline through appearances. But you cannot manage decay. You can only delay it, and every delay deepens the rot. Warning sign 5. Faith collapses before the walls do. An industrial empire is not held together by steel, it's held together by trust. Trust in the system, in the currency, in the promise that work leads to reward. When that faith dies, factories become relics, and money becomes paper. By the time Rome fell, its citizens no longer believed the coin in their hand meant anything. Inflation had eroded the silver content to almost nothing. People began bartering again. The empire still had walls, armies, and laws, but it had lost faith. Britain faced the same reckoning after World War II. The pound, once the reserve currency of the world, was devalued overnight in 1949. The empire's symbol of stability collapsed, not through invasion, but through inflation. Faith is invisible until it's gone, and once it's gone, rebuilding it is nearly impossible. Across centuries, the pattern repeats like a ghostly metronome. Innovation gives rise to dominance. Dominance gives rise to arrogance. Arrogance gives rise to decline. Every industrial empire, Rome's iron, Britain's coal, America's oil, follows the same life cycle. Each begins by conquering scarcity and ends by creating excess. The machine that once symbolized progress becomes a monument to decay. Yet, here lies the great illusion. Every empire believes it's different. Rome thought its legions made it eternal. Britain thought its navy made it untouchable. America believes its technology makes it immortal. But history has never spared the proud. The Industrial Revolution wasn't just a turning point in history, it was a pattern accelerator. Before, decline took centuries. Now, it takes decades. The faster we build, the faster we burn. Think of Detroit, once the beating heart of American industry, a city where machines roared louder than faith. By the 1950s, it was the symbol of industrial might. Cars, steel, and hope rolled off its assembly lines. By the 1980s, it was a wasteland of unemployment and crime. And today, nature reclaims its ruins. Grass grows through the cracks of factories that once fed millions. Empires don't die when their enemies strike, they die when their people stop caring. Detroit was not conquered by an invader. It was abandoned by an illusion. The illusion that industrial prosperity could exist without industrial purpose. When a civilization stops making things, it starts making excuses. We can measure decline in many ways: GDP, debt, unemployment. But the truest measure is spiritual. When people no longer take pride in what they create, when the craftsman becomes a consumer, when progress becomes entertainment, that's when the fall begins. Rome's final centuries were filled with pageantry, triumphal processions celebrating victories that never happened. Britain's last decades as an empire were filled with nostalgia films, parades, and tea parties honoring a past that no longer existed. America's decline is filled with screens, the digital reflection of a nation trying to remember what reality felt like. Every empire develops a coping mechanism. Rome distracted its citizens with gladiators. Britain distracted itself with colonial theater. America distracts itself with content. The industrial decline pattern isn't just economic, it's psychological. It begins when the mind of the nation turns inward, obsessing over comfort instead of challenge, identity instead of innovation. The same ingenuity that built machines begins to deconstruct meaning. When history repeats, it rarely announces itself. It whispers. A factory closure here, a mass layoff there, a generation that stops believing hard work leads anywhere. By the time the whispers turn into screams, it's already too late. The fall of every industrial power shares one quiet moment, when the people realize the system no longer needs them. That's when collapse becomes cultural. But patterns are not prophecies, they're warnings. Rome ignored them. Britain misunderstood them. And now, America stands at the same precipice. The machines are still running. The stock market still glows green. The politicians still promise recovery. But under the hum of progress, something ancient stirs the faint echo of collapse. The question isn't whether history will repeat, it's whether we will recognize it in time. When money loses meaning, what replaces it? When work loses purpose, what holds a nation together? And when comfort becomes our God, what happens when the God stops answering? This is the first stage of decline, the illusion of invincibility. And like all who came before, America believes it can escape the pattern, but the machine is slowing, and the silence, once again, is growing louder. Patterns never die, they adapt. The same forces that consumed Rome and Britain did not vanish. They evolved, and like a virus wearing new clothes, they spread across every industrial civilization that followed. When the machines took over, the illusion of control grew stronger, but so did the dependence. Humanity forgot the truth that every invention, no matter how grand, eventually invents a weakness of its own. Consider the Soviet Union, the industrial titan that promised equality through production. In the mid-20th century, the USSR built entire cities around factories, each one a shrine to steel and ideology. To the outside world, it looked unstoppable. Smokestacks filled the skies. Laborers marched in unity. Progress had a soundtrack, the rhythm of machines. But beneath that mechanical harmony was exhaustion, moral, physical, and economic. The Soviet system produced quantity, not quality. It valued output over innovation, obedience over creativity, and slowly, the gears began to grind against each other. By the 1980s, the Soviet miracle was rusting. Its industries couldn't compete. Its people couldn't believe. The illusion of progress became a theater of paperwork, endless reports of record output masking empty shelves. The fall of the USSR wasn't a single event. It was a slow-motion implosion. Factories that once symbolized power became ruins overnight. The same nation that built rockets couldn't build trust. That's the second echo in the pattern. When industrial ambition outruns moral foundation, collapse follows. The Soviets forgot that you cannot manufacture faith. You can only earn it. Now shift to Japan, another industrial miracle. From ashes in 1945 to global dominance by 1980, Japan seemed to have cracked the code. Its economy grew faster than any in modern history. Efficiency became a philosophy. Perfection became identity. The world watched in awe as Japanese cars, electronics, and engineering reshaped the 20th century. But prosperity has a strange way of softening the soul. The same discipline that built Japan became the weight that crushed it. By the late 1980s, the nation's wealth turned into speculation. The Nikkei stock index tripled in 3 years. Real estate prices soared so high that the land under the Imperial Palace in Tokyo was said to be worth more than all of California. Then came 1991, the bubble burst. Factories closed, banks drowned in bad debt. A once unbreakable work ethic met a silent crisis of meaning, and the lost decade began, one that never truly ended. For over 30 years, Japan has been trapped in economic limbo, not destroyed, but hollowed. It is the image of what decline looks like in slow motion, an empire too disciplined to collapse, but too exhausted to rise again. This is the third echo, when a nation's success becomes its prison, when perfectionism prevents rebirth, when a culture clings to what worked, instead of adapting to what's next. Britain did this with its colonies. Japan did this with its companies, and America today does it with its systems. Every empire at its peak stops asking questions. It begins defending its institutions instead of evolving them, and that defense becomes the first wall of its decline. Look again to Europe in the mid-20th century. After 2 world wars, it rebuilt, not just with machines, but with memory. Factories roared back to life. Cities rebuilt from ashes. Germany, France, and Italy rose again, powered by a generation that knew what scarcity felt like. But their children didn't. They inherited prosperity they didn't have to earn. And in the 1970s, something changed. Energy crises hit. Inflation soared. The worker who once built the nation began demanding comfort instead of purpose. The decline wasn't visible in smoke or rubble. It was visible in attitude. Work became a burden, not a duty. Sacrifice became optional. Governments began borrowing to maintain lifestyles rather than build futures. Industrial Europe aged not just demographically, but spiritually. Factories moved to cheaper lands. Skilled trades disappeared. The continent that once engineered the modern world became a museum of its former self. Walk through parts of northern England or eastern Germany today, and you'll see the same haunting image. Steel skeletons of factories overtaken by moss. Concrete towers echoing with the ghosts of shift whistles. Entire towns that once built trains, ships, and machines now surviving on service jobs and subsidies. This is the fourth echo, the emotional decay of civilization. When a nation's pride in creation fades, its sense of purpose goes with it. And once purpose dies, progress becomes performance. Now look west, across the Atlantic, and the echoes converge. The American empire rose on the same industrial faith that built every great civilization before it. It conquered scarcity with oil, machines, and optimism. And for a century, it truly was different. But history doesn't repeat for those who remember it. It repeats for those who forget, and America forgot. Its factories were temples of progress once. Pittsburgh's steel, Detroit's cars, Ohio's rubber, each one a hymn to human potential. But beginning in the late 20th century, the same forces that hollowed Britain began whispering across the Atlantic. Globalization promised efficiency. Outsourcing promised profit. Automation promised speed. And in the process, America traded its identity for convenience. The blue-collar worker, once the symbol of national pride, became expendable. Manufacturing towns decayed. The middle class, built by production, was replaced by a service economy built on debt. A nation that once made everything now makes nothing but content. Today, China builds the machines, India writes the code, and America sells the dream. But dreams don't hold up economies. They decorate collapses. This is where the pattern deepens, not in economics, but in psychology. Because decline doesn't start with numbers, it starts with beliefs. The Romans believed they were chosen. The British believed they were civilized. The Soviets believed they were just. The Japanese believed they were perfect. And America believes it's exceptional. Every empire builds a myth strong enough to blind itself, and that blindness is the true engine of decline. America's factories didn't close because they had to. They closed because the market said it was cheaper elsewhere, and society agreed. No one protested when the machines left. They only complained when the jobs did. The tragedy of modern civilization is that we've learned to accept decay as progress. We call it efficiency. We call it innovation. But what it really means is extraction without renewal. We're watching the same process unfold, not with swords or ships, but with screens and spreadsheets. Every generation of decline finds a new language to hide the truth. Rome hid it behind conquest. Britain hid it behind trade. America hides it behind technology. We keep inventing tools to escape consequences, but no empire has ever coded its way out of gravity. The industrial decline pattern is not a prophecy of doom, it's a mirror. And when we look into it, we see our reflection wearing the clothes of past empires. Our politics polarized like Rome's Senate in its final days. Our debts spiraling like Britain's at the end of its empire. Our faith dissolving like the Soviet citizen staring at an empty store shelf. Our youth disillusioned, medicated, detached. The signs are there. But history tells us something subtle. Decline doesn't mean destruction. It means transformation. Every fallen empire gives birth to something new. The question is, what comes next, renewal or ruin? When Rome fell, Europe entered a dark age, but from that darkness came the Renaissance. When Britain declined, America rose. And now, as America falters, something else is forming quietly, globally, beyond the noise of politics. The center of power is shifting again, eastward, digital, decentralized, and like every previous empire, America will likely deny it until it's undeniable. The pattern didn't end, it just changed flags. So we must ask ourselves, if history always warns us, why do we never listen? Is it arrogance? Or is it that deep down, every civilization secretly wants to believe the pattern is someone else's story? Because once you admit you're in it, the illusion breaks. And no empire, ancient or modern, survives the moment it sees itself clearly. Collapse never begins with a crash. It begins with applause. When the system declares victory over the laws of nature, that's when gravity starts its quiet work. America's modern decline didn't start with war or disaster. It started with comfort. Factories once filled the air with smoke, now the air is clear, but so are the shelves of purpose. Men once built steel, bridges, and locomotives. Now they build brands, profiles, and distractions. The new machine doesn't run on coal or oil, it runs on attention. And attention, unlike steel, cannot build a civilization. We call this progress. But the truth is simpler. We replaced production with performance. And when the cameras turned on, the machinery of decline sped up. Look closer. The United States today stands on a mountain of invisible promises, $36 trillion in national debt and counting. Every dollar printed is a whisper of faith that tomorrow we'll still believe in it. But faith, once broken, doesn't recover, it collapses. Empires don't fall because they run out of resources. They fall because they run out of meaning. The American dream was once built in factories. Now it's built on screens. And the algorithm, not the assembly line, decides what matters. In the early 20th century, the worker believed in the system. He built cars he could one day own. He paid taxes that built schools his children would attend. There was a direct connection between effort and reward. But in the 21st century, that thread snapped. A man can work 2 jobs and still not afford rent. A college degree once meant opportunity, now it means debt. The harder people work, the further they seem to fall behind. That is the psychological heart of decline, when effort no longer equals progress. When the system feels rigged not by accident, but by design. Rome faced the same erosion. Its citizens once farmed their own land, but as the empire expanded, small farmers were crushed by estates owned by elites. The same soil that once gave them dignity became the property of others. Dispossessed and desperate, they fled to the cities where bread was free, but life was meaningless. Today, the American equivalent isn't bread, it's credit. We no longer hand out loaves to the poor, we hand out credit cards. And both serve the same purpose. To buy silence, debt has become America's new form of governance. The average citizen is chained not by law, but by loans. The student debt, the car payment, the mortgage, all invisible shackles disguised as freedom, and as long as people owe, they obey. This is how empires manage decline, not through tyranny, but through dependency. Because dependence breeds docility, and docility is peace until the money runs out. America's industrial base once defined its strength, but over decades it has been replaced by a digital empire, an empire of screens, symbols, and code. Instead of manufacturing goods, it manufactures narratives. Instead of exporting steel, it exports ideology. Instead of discipline, it sells dopamine. And the world, for now, still buys it. But that dominance, like all others, is cracking. For the first time in a century, the American export machine is losing to rivals it once dismissed. The semiconductor supply chain depends on Asia. The rare earth metals come from Africa. The cheap labor comes from elsewhere. Even the knowledge, the sacred core of modern power, is no longer exclusively American. When the empire's core becomes dependent on the periphery, collapse is only a question of timing. Britain learned this lesson when it relied on its colonies for raw materials. Rome learned it when it relied on imports for grain. America is learning it through code and commodities. The modern empire is digital, but the physics of decline haven't changed. Every civilization creates its own religion. For Rome, it was the emperor. For Britain, it was civilization itself. For America, it's technology. We worship innovation as salvation. Every year promises the next big breakthrough, the thing that will fix everything. Artificial intelligence, green energy, digital money, but none of these change the pattern. They only accelerate it. AI doesn't end the industrial decline pattern. It completes it, because the moment humans no longer build, think, or create for themselves, the machine no longer serves them. They serve it. We built technology to make life easier. Now, it makes life meaningless. We built algorithms to connect us. Now, they isolate us in echo chambers of distraction. We built automation to free our time. Now, we sell our time to feed the automation. This is how the pattern evolves, not through destruction, but through substitution. The empire no longer needs citizens, it only needs users. And once citizens become users, decline becomes irreversible. Economically, the system still functions for now. The dollar remains strong, the markets hum. The illusion of prosperity endures. But beneath that surface lies the rot. 70% of US GDP comes from consumption, not production, and half of that consumption is financed by debt, a system eating itself to stay alive. When a civilization must borrow its future to pay for its present, the future is already gone. The same pattern unfolded in late-stage Rome. The empire debased its currency to fund wars it couldn't afford. It issued more coinage with less silver, inflating away trust. People began to notice slowly at first, then all at once. Faith cracked, markets froze, the army stopped getting paid, and the legions that once guarded the empire began selling their loyalty to the highest bidder. Today, America's soldiers aren't mercenaries, but its corporations are. They serve not nations, but shareholders. And when the nation stops paying, they'll serve someone else. The empire of industry has become an empire of interest. There's another layer to this decline, the moral one. No civilization collapses without first losing its sense of right and wrong. The Romans once prized virtue, courage, duty, discipline. By the end, they prized pleasure, spectacle, and distraction. Modern America mirrors this perfectly. Entertainment has replaced achievement. Celebrities have replaced heroes. And morality itself has become a matter of marketing. We no longer ask what is true, we ask what trends. And the truth, in the digital age, has no currency unless it sells. When lies become profitable, truth becomes extinct. And when truth dies, empires follow. This is not the apocalypse. This is arithmetic. A society that spends more than it earns, consumes more than it produces, and believes more in illusion than integrity cannot endure. But collapse, in the modern age, will not look like Rome's burning or Britain's retreat. It will look like scrolling. It will sound like applause. It will feel like convenience. And it will happen quietly while everyone is too entertained to notice. Yet decline is never purely external. It begins in the heart. The individual reflects the empire. When people lose pride in their work, integrity in their word, and meaning in their life, the collapse is already personal. You can rebuild a city. You can't rebuild a soul. Every generation believes it will be the one to reverse the pattern. They write books, form movements, elect leaders, but the machine keeps turning. Because no leader can fix what a culture refuses to admit is broken. The fall of America, like all great empires, won't be a single moment. It will be a gradual revelation the moment people realize the empire still exists, but the idea of it no longer does. Rome still had emperors long after it had lost power. Britain still had colonies long after it had lost influence. And America will still have elections, movies, and brands long after it's lost faith. Collapse is not destruction, it's disconnection. The form remains, the substance disappears. And perhaps that's the most dangerous illusion of all. Believing the empire still lives because the lights are still on. Every day the numbers grow higher, the debt, the divisions, the distractions, and every day the silence grows deeper. The silence of people who sense the end but cannot name it, who feel the ground shifting beneath them but keep scrolling anyway. This is not the fall of America. It's the forgetting of America, the slow erasure of memory, meaning, and mastery. The collapse won't happen when the dollar dies. It will happen when the dream does. And that dream, the belief that hard work leads somewhere, that truth still matters, that tomorrow can be better, is fading. Empires fall for many reasons, but they all share one fatal illusion. They think they have more time. And time, like faith, cannot be printed. Every empire believes it can innovate its way out of gravity. Every empire believes it can borrow against eternity. And every empire learns too late that even eternity sends the bill. So we ask again, can a system built on debt survive the loss of faith? Can a civilization built on comfort survive the loss of struggle? Can a people built on pride survive the loss of purpose? If the answers frighten you, they should, because the pattern isn't ancient anymore. It's alive, it's here, and it wears our reflection. All empires fall, but not all people within them do. History's great collapses are graveyards of systems, not souls. For every civilization that crumbled, there were always individuals who saw it coming, who adapted, who endured. The merchants who fled Rome before the legions mutinied, the artisans who left London before the pound broke, the investors who saw the bubbles, the thinkers who saw the lies, the builders who started over when the world stopped believing. Collapse is collective. Survival is personal. When systems fail, the instinct is to look upward for salvation. A new leader, a new party, a new plan. But history whispers the same answer again and again. The rescue never comes from above. It begins below, in the quiet resolve of individuals who refuse to decay with the system around them. The lesson of every fallen empire is not despair. It is responsibility. The first step is seeing clearly. To pierce through illusion is to regain freedom. The modern citizen is surrounded by noise, data, debates, distractions, but very little truth. To see clearly means stepping back from the spectacle, turning off the performance of collapse long enough to understand its structure. The empire is built on attention. Every click, every outrage, every argument is the currency of control. To withdraw your attention from the machine is to begin starving it, not through rebellion, but through awareness. The second step is rebuilding skill. Every civilization that endured transition did so because people still knew how to make. When Rome fell, it was the monks who copied books by hand, preserving knowledge for centuries. When Britain declined, it was the engineers and scientists who reinvented their crafts for a smaller island. Today, the skill of creation is disappearing. We outsource everything, our food, our products, even our thoughts. But the future will belong to those who can build with their hands, think with their own minds, and repair what others depend on. The post-industrial world will not reward titles, it will reward usefulness. Learn to fix, learn to plant, learn to design, write, create, and trade directly. In times of collapse, those who create value become the new aristocracy. The third step is diversification, not just of wealth, but of identity. Empires make the same promise to everyone: trust us, we'll provide. But when the system fails, those who depend on it most fall the hardest. The Roman farmer who relied on the grain dole starved first. The British investor who trusted the pound lost everything overnight. The modern worker who trusts the pension, the market, or the government will face the same lesson. Diversify your income, your skills, your community, your worldview. Don't bet your survival on any single structure, political, financial, or digital. The true currency of the next age will not be dollars, it will be resilience. Own something real, not just land or metal, but competence, trust, and character. The assets that cannot be printed will be the only ones that endure. The fourth step is rebuilding community. Every empire fragments before it falls. People retreat into tribes, political, ideological, digital, forgetting they share the same sinking ship. But after collapse, survival always depends on connection. Rome's roads fell silent, but small villages survived because they shared food, labor, and belief. When the Soviet Union fell, families and local networks kept people alive through barter, not bureaucracy. Technology isolates us while pretending to unite us. But the next era will belong to those who remember how to cooperate without it. Start small, talk to neighbors, trade skills. Build trust that isn't algorithmic. Because when systems fail, only human bonds remain real. And finally, remember the mind. Empires collapse outwardly only after they've collapsed inwardly. Cynicism is the final contagion of decline. When people stop believing in anything, not money, not meaning, not each other, the ruins arrive quickly. You cannot rebuild a nation if you've already surrendered your spirit. So start there. Rebuild your faith, not in systems, but in principles. Honesty, effort, simplicity, gratitude. These are the bricks that survive every fall. The men and women who live through collapse and emerge stronger are never the loudest. They're the ones who plant gardens while others panic, who build tools while others argue, who keep the fire of meaning alive while the world goes dark. History doesn't owe us a future, but it offers us a pattern, one written in ashes and rebuilt in hands. If you understand it, you don't have to fear it. The end of an age is not the end of the world. It's the clearing of the field for something truer to grow. Every collapse is also a revelation. It reveals what was real all along and what never was. Gold still shines when empires burn. Faith still guides when markets fail. And truth, once rediscovered, outlives every system built to bury it. So, when the noise of decline grows deafening, remember, the greatest civilizations weren't defined by how they rose, but by what survived when they fell. Because the pattern isn't destiny, it's a mirror. And what we do when we face it, that's what defines us. If this opened your eyes, subscribe. History isn't repeating, it's warning. And if you believe these stories deserve to be told, please like and share. It helps me keep doing this full time. This is Wealth and Ruins, where history meets the cost of power.